Blood slicks the pine floor while wind rattles loose siding like dry bones. Caleb Ward sinks against the kitchen island, breath hot and ragged, counting heartbeats between far-off sirens. Rex Canine stands over him, paws squared, ears slashed into the storm hush, reading the house the way a tracker reads snow. Outside, boots crunch in practiced cadence, a ring tightening around a small light in a large wilderness. The muzzle of a service weapon floats at the edge of the doorway like a black crescent moon. Dust drifts in beams of pale morning, showing every tremor in the air. Caleb's hands find old scars in the wood. Rex Canine's shoulder presses into him, a living brace. The dog's gaze fixes on the doorway first, then the back window, then the ceiling, mapping angles, waiting for the moment when moving becomes survival. The forest wears its breath like silk. Frost twines grasses into glass needles. Rex Canine darts ahead of Caleb, paws soundless, nostrils sifting layers of scent the way a safecracker reads tumblers. A single bark shakes the mist, not playful and not warning, but a declaration that the earth is telling a story. An oak squats on the property line like an old cathedral, trunk swollen above a knotted seam. Sap oozes darker than it should, carrying a metallic ghost that does not belong to trees. Caleb's spine tightens. He knows the smell without wanting to. Rex Canine circles the bulge, head low, ribcage rising and falling like a bellows. The dog stops beneath the seam and plants a paw against the bark, then another, anchoring the morning to a point that every instinct says was meant to stay unvisited.
The room in memory is winter bright and soft with machines. A photo stuck to a refrigerator holds an unblinking smile. Caleb remembers hands that smelled like soap and acrylic paint, a hallway of beige walls, and the gravity of doors that only swing one way. He remembers returning to a home that did not remember him. Later, a shelter gate clicks, and a young shepherd pup steps forward like a quiet decision. Rex Canine's eyes are not eyes in that moment, but lanterns, pooling gold over concrete. His breath fogs the cold and carries the tempered iron of resolve. Years coil quickly. Snowfalls blur. Nightwalks carve straight lines through crooked months. Rex Canine learns the property line by stars and fence posts, learns the cadence of storms, learns the exact hinge squeal of the back door. The bond forms with the certainty of frost hardening mud. Metal splits bark with a soft, wet sigh. The smell blooms fast and cruel, thudding against the back of the throat. Rex Canine hunches, weight tucked into his hips, eyes lifting to study the split as if language might fall out. The bark peels like old leather. Beneath it, a thread of fabric slumps and drinks air for the first time in years. The wind shifts, and the forest listens with all its tiny green ears. Caleb's hands move with the muscle memory of a life he buried under quiet routines and hard coffee. Resin clings to his knuckles. The oak seems to exhale, relieved or reluctant, impossible to tell. Rex Canine takes one step back, then another, tail stiff, a slight tremor traveling from shoulder to paw. The morning goes tight around them, the way a drum stretches before the first strike.
Light winks where light should not be. Sap beads a small shield into existence, numbers crusted in brown, a shape any cop can recognize even in dreams. Air loses warmth, time loses distance. The forest becomes a room without windows. Rex Canine leans his head into Caleb's thigh as though bracing a structure about to fail. Caleb sees patrol routes scrawled on old maps,
Coffee rings on briefing tables. A hand on a shoulder at 2 in the morning after a door finally opened to nothing. The badge number rises through static, a coded knock from wood and rot. Caleb gathers it like it might break, and for a heartbeat, the weight in his palm is heavier than gravity. The oak holds the rest, patient as earth. Rex Canine's ears tilt toward the ridge. Something living and deliberate is already listening. The house is smaller in daylight, walls nearer, roof lower. Scuffed boot prints pattern the porch. A radio murmurs too quiet to be helpful. Rex Canine stands in the kitchen doorway, chest wide, choosing lines of sight like a chess player chooses tempo. The shape in the hall leans just enough to reveal the polished corner of a holster. Dust motes revolve around the silhouette like planets obeying a darker sun. Caleb inventories the room the way a diver checks gauges. One drawer away lives a habit he promised never to open. Rex Canine glances at that drawer, then the door, then returns to Caleb's face. The dog is telling him the math. Outside, a truck door shuts with care, an animal hunter's sound, not a neighbor's. The air inside cools in a way that does not belong to weather.
Silence collects in the seams of the cabin, smelling of cedar and stale coffee. Calendars curl at the edges. On the mantel, faces look outward from a yesterday that never learned today's language. Caleb moves through rooms he built by hand to keep a fractured mind from cutting him. Rex Canine learned each nail and knot, learned when to lean against a leg to stop a spiral from widening. The dog's coat still carries a trace of wood smoke and the faint mineral of creek water. Every lost thing sits at the same table in this house, a partner without a grave, a life without a future tense. Outside, tires crush gravel in unison. Inside, the clock refuses to tick, holding its breath with the rest of the walls. Rex Canine's head lifts. The house becomes a rib cage, braced for impact. A patrol unit ghosts up the access road, paint catching the pallid sun. The radio inside is turned down 2 clicks too far. Doors open with measured quiet. Deputy Mara Voss steps into the cold like someone who reads rooms by scent. Rex Canine freezes the scene before it can start, gaze hard on her hands, on her belt, on the way her shoulders angle toward the oak without turning her head. The dog's tail does not move. Breath steams from nostrils in 2 precise valves. She walks the perimeter that isn't hers, eyes touching disturbed bark, scuffed dirt, the knife mark that isn't a hunter's mark. The air tastes like pennies. The forest sends a jay's scold as if to file a complaint. Rex Canine stands between door and man, the narrow corridor of trust guarded by 80 pounds of intent.
Question marks arrange themselves on a clipboard somewhere out of sight. The road is blocked at the bend where the old fence sags. Radios don't crackle with routine check-ins. She studies the ground the way a safecracker studies scratches on brass. Rex Canine catalogs her cadence, notes the off-beat when she crosses the line between duty and rehearsal. Caleb feels the pattern bloom behind his sternum. Staged concern, controlled angles, a script written by someone who builds stories for reports. Frost lifts as the sun crawls from the trees. The oak stays dark and wet, humming a low song of compression and time. Rex Canine's ears cut left toward brush moving without wind. The dog's breath shortens to the tempo that precedes flight or bite. The day narrows, lanes closing, options evaporating against a sudden heat. 15 winters peeled backward in a single exhale. A motel lamp flickers over a map stabbed with pushpins. Coffee gleams like molasses in a chipped mug. A man with tired hands draws circles around a name that keeps moving. Roads slide under bald tires. Barn lights burn in fields that should be dark. The lead winds into timber country, where signals go to die and secrets grow rings. Files go missing inside cabinets that never admit mistakes. A patrol car never returns to the lot. The note on a desk says only that the noise was getting close. Memory does not speak in sentences. It arrives as the smell of rain and wool, the fatigue in a jaw after too much clenching, The way a partner's laugh lives in a room long after he leaves it. The map waits where the road ended.
Steel parts wood again. The oak opens like a reluctant confession. Beneath the fabric, something rigid sits at an angle that belongs to a hip holster. Paper breathes where paper should not survive. The interior space feels ordered, as if hands arranged final things with care, then surrendered them to the slow discipline of growth. Rex Canine's nails click once against root flare, a code sent through the floor of the world. The wind drops. Even insects suspend bureaucracy. Caleb slides out a notebook sealed in a sleeve stiff with age. The pages cling together like frightened birds. On the floor of the woods, where needles and loam and shadow meet, the past stops pretending it is gone. Rex Canine's head swivels back to the house, then beyond it, to the ridge. Something has decided the waiting part is over. Pine needles tattle under weight in the tree line. The forest wears camouflage designed by its own hand, but movement has a flavor that a working dog never mistakes. Rex Canine tracks a smear of deodorant clouding the sours of damp wool, notes a tang of gun oil floating above crushed fern, threads through the gasoline veining the air near the bend. The watchers are not hunters of deer. Their patience is trained, not born. Caleb pockets the weight of proof and feels the land tilt underneath. An airplane scribbles a white line in the high blue as if offering an exit too far to matter. The oak stands unburdened and strangely lighter, as if grateful to share its ache. Rex Canine sets his front paws in the dirt like stakes. The day's page turns without a hand touching it.
Authority arrives as a familiar silhouette at the edge of the yard, shoulders square, chin set to a civic angle. The world loves a uniform that smiles at parades and cuts ribbons on parks. The air around the porch changes temperature by a degree only animals and detectives notice. Rex Canine reads the micro shifts. The dog knows postures that say safety and those that sell it. Old photographs on the mantel carried a different light around this face. Now the shine is stage makeup in daylight. The yard is a proscenium. The house is a backstage. The props are real. Caleb clips past and present together with a trembling staple. Wind furls the flag by the shed into a shape like a question not meant to be answered. Rex Canine plants himself in the axis of intentions and waits for gravity to pick a side. Footfalls spread into quadrants. The gravel reports to whoever listens. The cabin's windows reflect a shallow sky and three moving shadows that prefer to be theories. Radios hum without speaking, exchanging only pulse and permission. Rex Canine calibrates air pressure with the skin of his ears, notes the way light breaks on the doorknob when a shape interrupts it. Caleb feels the old training rise like heat from concrete. He takes inventory, distance to drawer, sight lines past the island, dead zones by the stove, the narrow run between hallway and mudroom where furniture makes a canyon. The dog breathes like a runner at the blocks. The property line is no longer a line, it is a throat. Birds stop narrating. The breeze pauses to listen. Somewhere in the brush, a finger tests a trigger it has tested too many times.
Sometimes the earth shifts before the sound arrives. A name that has not been spoken aloud in years floats like dust in angled sunrise. The oak keeps its own counsel. The house holds its own heat. Patterns once invisible step out into the center of the room and introduce themselves. Rex Canine's hackles cable along his spine, then settle, the choice postponed for half a breath.
Caleb lets the facts assemble themselves on the table of his skull. Nothing in the yard is random. Nothing in the corridor is casual. The compression is precise. Someone measured the square footage of options and priced it accordingly. Memory keeps offering different exits that all lead to the same door. The badge in his pocket burns cool and implacable. Rex Canine shifts weight to his right paw, signaling consequence. Funeral light has its own weather. Air hangs with lilies and winter breath. Hands fold and unfold hymnals that do not help. Years slide in a slow dissolve. A watcher by a bed breathing machines. A road flaring with hazard lights. A desk cleared while the chair still remembers a man's shape. These pages of life stack without chronology, bound only by the thin cord of endurance. On the bad nights, the cabin creaked like a ship, and weather tried to pry boards from nails. On the good mornings, coffee and dog warmed the cold belly of the day. Rex Canine learned where to press his weight when gravity went missing. The dog's steady presence ran a taut line through the loose fabric of grief. That line holds even while the forest prepares a different kind of ceremony.
Language tries to tidy ruin with numbers and charts. A ledger pretends to equal a conscience. Asphalt appears in town where there was mud. New uniforms gleam under gymnasium lights. A statue in a plaza discovers how hands stick gum to bronze. The story presented to crowds is a clean frame that never shows the nails. In a kitchen at the edge of the woods, the other story breathes under a floorboard. Rex Canine marks time with quiet inhalations, the rhythm of a metronome set to truth. Caleb has heard every version of necessity, crafted by men who confuse convenience with virtue. Outside, a crow coughs a sound that resembles laughter. Inside, steam lifts from a cup that no one touches. The ledger can't balance what was sealed in living wood. The forest keeps receipts that numbers cannot cancel. The dog's body speaks first. A ripple under coat, a soft weight shift, a breath that shortens by half. Rex Canine reads a swirl of skin salt and nylon, a sugar note of mint gum, the copper hush of a chambered round. The world narrows to footsteps that do not belong to birdsong or wind. In the hall, a drawer waits like a sleeping animal with teeth. The floorboards hold their voices. Caleb's hands hover over the air where a weapon used to be a job, and now would only be a decision. Dust settles on the rim of a glass as if trying to hide. Rex Canine flicks a glance toward the back door, where escape used to be a plan, and is now a story for later. The dog's breath clicks once in his throat. The next page turns.
Everything that was poised chooses a direction at once. The air shatters into loud light and splinters. Furniture learns about gravity the hard way. Rex Canine becomes motion and noise inside a small space, shoulders turning sideways in seams where humans cannot fit. Weight striking weapon hand, teeth closing around polymer, not flesh. Caleb slides behind the island where memory says safety is more likely. Shell casings jump like insects in summer. Drywall powders the air. The house coughs up 10 years of quiet in 10 seconds. A picture frame drops a life to the floor in glass and paper. The smell of cordite braids with the dog's hot breath. Footing becomes a theory. Training replaces hope. The old muscle memory climbs into Caleb's bones as if it never left, and with it the cold clarity that attends necessary acts. Noise rolls outward and finds ears that were already waiting. Vehicles idle where they should not. Names that once meant trust are etched into nervous silence. This is not a single bad choice. It is a lattice built over seasons, a scaffold disguised as a staircase. Papers were signed in clean rooms. Hands were shaken in public, washed in private. The routes that money takes imitate creeks in spring, searching lower ground, carving channels into soil that looks solid until boots sink. Rex Canine's chest pumps like bellows.
Caleb sees the map pinned across years, the pattern of closed doors and sudden promotions, the work that was too good to be scrutinized. The oak outside stopped pretending today. The cabin refuses to pretend now. The world is smaller and truer when the walls admit what they have heard.
Impact arrives in a straight line that curbs a life. The barrel lifts, the sight levels, the report cracks the room in half. Rex K9 chooses the only path available to devotion. Muscle, bone, and speed rewrite a geometry that once ended in a man's sternum. The bullet's story finds new language in a ribcage that never once hesitated at a doorway. Sound compresses to the throb in a vein. Light whitens into a single hard stripe across a countertop. Caleb's hands become a cradle before he realizes they moved. Heat pours through denim into skin. The world contracts to a heartbeat counted in another chest. In every long night that led here, Rex K9 walked circles at the foot of a bed until breathing eased. Now the roles invert. The room holds its breath with the man. Blood finds seams in wood that have waited for rain. Rex K9's eyes stay on Caleb with a steadiness that erases everything not essential. Outside, a voice rises, then dies. The forest swallows it the way a lake swallows a thrown stone. The kitchen becomes a chapel built from smoke and lists. Memory slides into the present without asking permission. A small hand holds a leash on a day bright with summer, and a shepherd pup looks up as if the world might be manageable after all. In the cabin now, time's gear slips a tooth and shudders. Caleb feels the weight of 100 unmade choices press against his shoulders and recognizes that only one matters. He seals the wound with both palms and lets the heat burn truth into them. The heartbeat under skin flickers, then steadies, then falters.
Grief hardens, like sudden ice on a pond. Beneath it moves a current with memory of force and direction. Caleb stands into a body that remembers rooms measured in angles and seconds, not regrets. The house reorganizes into lanes and cover. Every creak is an ally if used correctly. Rex K9 breathes in small sips, eyes tracking, still working the room because work is the language of loyalty. The badge in Caleb's pocket cools him like river water on a fever night. Every compromise that ever masqueraded as kindness stands in a line waiting for him to forget who he was trained to be. He does not. Hands choose, feet choose, mind chooses. The old oath rises uninvited and fits his chest like a dry shirt after rain. The air tightens for what must happen next. Gravel stirs where gravel should sleep. A pickup tops the rise with the determination of a ritual kept too long to break. The scene does not welcome an audience, yet an audience arrives because schedules do not ask conspiracies for permission. The yard stiffens. The men outside calculate a new variable they cannot easily silence. Inside, the cabin's breath shortens. Rex K9 turns his head toward the window with effort that looks like stubborn hope, eyes finding the shape in the driveway that means persistence has a face. The day's marriage to secrecy fractures. Plans made in rooms with blinds closed meet daylight that refuses to blink. The forest leans forward as if to hear human hearts renegotiate allegiance. In this altered math, every bullet carries a second signature. Every decision grows a shadow that stretches past the property line.
Sirens approach in threads that braid into one rope. Tires bite gravel with appetite. The geometry outside rearranges around vehicles that don't need permission from local hands. Radios recover their voices and talk in complete sentences. The circle around the cabin kinks in two places where confidence leaks. Air pressure lifts. Rex K9's breathing steadies to a fragile rhythm that makes space for plans. Caleb senses the timeline bending toward a version of events with witnesses who keep recordings even when told not to. The house loosens a fraction.
The porch boards remember their job as porch boards. The kitchen island becomes a barrier instead of an altar. The morning that began with frost now tastes like metal and paperwork. Somewhere in the engine noise rides a chance the story will outlive whoever started it. Control, like suits and schedules, hates improvisation. The day forces it to dance barefoot on gravel. Phrases return to rooms where they were first whispered, but this time, microphones wait. A mouth that enjoyed summaries and ceremonies discovers how verbs can burn. Rex K9's chest lifts and falls with stern insistence, the body arguing for its own continuation. Caleb lets silence do a piece of the work that shouting never accomplishes. Paper finds ink in places where signatures once used pencil. The myth of necessary dirt dissolves when washed in light strong enough to show scratches in polish. The sound a gun makes when it is laid down voluntarily is small but final. The forest exhales for the first time in hours, sending resin and cold into a kitchen salted with truth.
Truth does not arrive as triumph. It comes as a settling, like a house that finally stops creaking after a storm. Shoes scuff a threshold. Eyes lift to meet a past that is no longer hypothetical. Names spoken plainly sound heavier than when cloaked in title. The woman at the door has carried a weight more constant than winter. Paper on the table gives up a name that was missing from graveside prayers. The cabin stands still for this acceptance. Rex K9 watches from the floor, gaze bright despite pain, reading faces with the old skill that made him indispensable in nights that tried to come apart. The air tastes like metal loosening. Somewhere in town, a bell rings for no reason anyone can name. Inside this room, reasons finally change shape. Light slants through kitchen windows in late afternoon amber, glowing on the edges of debris. Technicians move with the choreography of necessary care. Bags whisper, cameras blink. The house, bruised and battered, offers up narratives written in powder and trajectories. Rex K9 lies wrapped in a blanket that smells like pine and the unremarkable detergent of laundromats. Caleb kneels beside him, steadying his own breath to the drum of a chest he has counted like prayer. Outside, shadows lengthen toward the oak that gave up its secret. The notebook sits sealed, its pages now tasked with speaking against decades of practiced silence. None of this brings back what has been sold, traded, or buried. Yet the room now contains a future tense that did not exist at sunrise. The floorboards hold it carefully, as if it might spill.
Arrests ripple outward along roads that believed themselves private. Offices empty of framed photos and awards that once seemed welded to walls. In attics and basements, boxes wake to the sound of tape ripping. The town wears a new posture, unsure where to put its hands while standing. This is not healing yet. It is the removal of infection that pretended to be health. The forest adjusts, wind combing needles back into patterns, animals reclaiming paths briefly haunted by human urgency. In the cabin, Rex K9 sleeps, the stubborn machinery of life reassembling itself one breath at a time. Caleb holds a badge that no longer smells like sap, but still carries the weight of a voice that used to fill car rides at 2 a.m. Maps on a table sprout pins that might point farther than anyone hoped. Morning rinses the mountains with milk blue light. The oak's wounded seam wears new sap like varnish on an old violin. The cabin door opens on hinges that learned new music yesterday. Caleb steps onto the porch with two small weights in one hand, a badge battered into testimony, and a collar worn smooth by 1,000 ordinary days. Rex K9 leans against his knee with the assurance of an oath kept. The road away from the property bends into trees, then into town, then into the larger map that waits for names to be cleared and buried things to be found. The air smells of frost and clean paper. The forest resumes its routine, but something essential has shifted. Secrets do not sleep as deeply as they used to. Footsteps descend the steps that survived, carrying forward what must continue.